Welcome to CDMO Career Stories, part of the Metric Podcast Network. The careers that shape the CDMO and biopharma industry rarely follow a straight line. This show is about the people behind them. Every episode, we sit down with senior leaders and commercial practitioners to talk about the decisions that define them, how they build and lead high-performing teams, how they win business, and where the talent landscape is heading next. We're here in New York on day one of DCAT 2026. I'm joined by Dirk Lange, CEO of Pyramid Pharma Services. Dirk, thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it. It's a busy week, DCAT week, and kind of the first day, so I know it's always a busy time. So thanks for coming on. I guess for anybody that isn't aware and perhaps doesn't know Dirk and doesn't know Pyramid, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So Dirk Lange, CEO here at Pyramid Pharma Services. Joined the organization 2 years ago. Actually, I took over from the founder who started the business in 1988. So he ran the business for 36 years. And when I joined, he shook my hand and said, okay, the next 36 years are on you. So quite a ways in front of me.
No pressure.
So CEO here since 2 years, about 30 years in the industry, building and running mainly contract services, CDMO businesses.
Great. Perfect. And I guess I obviously appreciate you've been in the industry for a long time. What was it that made you choose the CDMO world?
I wouldn't say I chose it. I think it was one of those things that evolved over the years. In fact, a funny story, a couple of years back, I started reflecting on my career, and then I noticed that I actually spent a couple of decades in the industry because time flies when we're having fun, right? So I literally started as a job, right? I mean, I started an apprenticeship at age 17 back in Germany, which is, by the way, a wonderful concept. I really enjoyed that kind of education because it's half practical, like working at a facility and hands-on experience in the job, and then the other half is like school and education around it. It exposed me to a lot of different things, and I just got stuck basically in the industry. And now looking back, I couldn't have chosen a better route, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose you briefly sort of left the pharma services industry, so in your time at Novartis, so you sort of stepped out and then stepped back in. So how was that transition, and I suppose what brought you back?
Right. So it was very interesting to walk in the shoes of our clients. Right. So I started on the CDMO side, started their operations, and pivoted into other roles, which gives good perspective from the service provider perspective. However, walking in the shoes of the client was also really eye-opening. So on the service provider side, you see that interface with the client. You see how clients switch their forecasts around, right? And you're sitting there receiving the updated forecast, and either they drop in demand or they rise in demand, but it's like hard to get it right. Sitting on the other side of the table was very interesting to see how a drug maker and innovator goes about launch forecasts, right? And what all goes into creating the forecast that then gets handed over to the CDMO. And now I have a much greater appreciation for what's happening on the other side of the table, right? Not just sitting on the receiving end, but having walked through the processes of launching a biologics and securing the external supply. So I think it's a helpful perspective, but I'm also very happy to be back on the CDMO side. I think there's just something about the service business that I find is exciting to think about. How can we optimize even more how we provide value to our clients, and I enjoy that about the CDMO business.
Great. And obviously, as we've mentioned, you've spent a lot of time in the industry. Was there a certain point at which you thought, yeah, this is the right space for me, this is the best place for me to sort of continue my career, or is it just kind of flown by?
Yeah. It's flown by, but there were a couple moments when I started looking at different aspects of building a career, right? I didn't set out with like a 5 or 10 year plan and said, this is exactly what I wanted to do, right? I got into the industry, had exposure to a number of different things. I started to notice what I like and what I don't like, and then you automatically kind of navigate towards those things and spend more time, get really good at it, and then expand from there. I will say that at some point I had the idea that making a career is more, and more is better, kind of in terms of higher in the career ladder, or running a bigger business, or having more revenue, or having more employees or so in your organization. And I will say, for me personally, that's not necessarily the case. For example, the role I have right now, which is the CEO role at a privately held business, is a lot of fun. It gives you a lot of flexibility, agility to implement strategies and act really, really fast. In prior roles, I ran a $1 billion P&L in a publicly traded organization. Also great exposure, was fantastic learning and so forth. But things are moving maybe a little slower at $1 billion than at a slightly smaller business. So I noticed that more is not always better. And making a career doesn't mean that you have to have thousands of employees. There might be a sweet spot where you can really create a lot of impact, which is, I think, one of the most rewarding things now that I look back at 30 years. It's like, where did I have the most impact? Where could I create the most value, really?
Sure. And given your sort of your operational background, you've come at this role as CEO, and obviously you've had previous CEO roles. So you've approached those as an operational, I guess, from an operational perspective. So how do you think that sort of prepared you for managing a large P&L and ultimately managing an entire business?
I think it's helpful to understand the services that you provide, right? In our case, if it's Pyramid Pharma Services, a drug product CDMO, providing sterile fill finish services to our clients. I grew up on the shop floor in sterile fill finish and ran fill lines and loaded lyophilizers, and had deep technical experience in it. And I think clients often appreciate when the executives understand what's happening at the shop floor, so they can relate. And when you talk with the client about how does that tech transfer strategy look like, how does the CMC strategy look like, if you walked in those shoes, if you performed these tasks, I think there's a lot of weight that it puts on writing a proposal exactly about those things that how operationally it's going to be executed on the shop floor.
So essentially, you take the operational and sort of technical know-how and you essentially apply that in a commercial sense anyway.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it literally helps to understand, and I can visualize when I review a proposal about maybe a late stage process validation study or so. I review the proposal and I go through in my head and like, how are we going to draw this sample from that container at this stage, right? So just for me, being a very visual guy, I guess it's helpful to relate back to the operational days and also do a quick reality check. So yeah, it's handy. I don't think it's necessarily a requirement, right? You don't have to spend years on the shop floor, but I encourage everybody also on my leadership team to spend time on the floor and work alongside folks, not just do a site tour, right? And pass through the hallway and look through the window and say, that's interesting. But if you're writing proposals, or if you're in finance and you're doing the costing behind it, right? I want everybody to spend time on the floor, go there for a couple days, observe the process, so you really understand what goes into it, other than just relying on the spreadsheet, right?
Great. Okay. So regardless of function or sort of area of the business, you think it's important that everybody understands the sort of direction and I guess the sort of the purpose of the business.
Correct. Yeah, I think very much in value creation models. So wherever the value is being created, if it's a manufacturing site, then that's the heart of the organization, right? And you need to understand how you deliver on those client commitments and what really goes into it, and talk to the operators and talk to the supervisors there, and try to gain as much knowledge about how you deliver on your client commitments. That can only be helpful in any position, really.
Great. So in terms of building and leading teams at Pyramid and in the past, in terms of your leadership roles, what do you typically look for beyond just a CV?
The CV, by the time candidates talk to me, they went through HR interviews, they went through the functional interviews with the respective hiring manager. So I oftentimes don't look at the CV because to me, they've been vetted enough to know that they can do the job, right? So that's, I set this as the expectation that whenever a candidate talks to me, I know they're qualified enough, right? They have the right education, experience, and so forth. So when I look at a candidate, it's mainly around fit, right? And to me, that's especially cultural fit, but also fit for the respective position at the right time in the right organization, right? Because talent, I don't think there's something like a universal talent, right? This person is just so talented, they're going to do well in every environment, in every role or so. I think there's a lot that goes into how does the person, what drives the person? How driven are they? What motivates them and so forth? Like, how is their personality really translating into exactly our environment, which is in the CDMO business very often a fast-paced, very dynamic environment, right? Because the CDMO business is impacted by so many different clients that you're managing at the same time. It's never a dull moment in our industry. Or if there is, I haven't come across it. And therefore, I'm looking for folks that thrive in that environment, right? And I'm always extremely transparent about this in the interview process because a lot of people will say like, yeah, I do great in a dynamic environment and I need like high pace and so forth. And they say that, they probably also mean it, but that doesn't always mean that it actually works out. So I'm brutally honest in the interview process, describing exactly what they're getting themselves into. And then I watch for the reaction, right? Because it's one thing to say that, knowing that you actually rather know you have a 9 to 5 and you don't have to, work on a client escalation call on Friday at 8 o'clock at night or so, right? And the reaction that I see when I'm putting this all out there is very telling if the person is ultimately going to do well in the role or not.
Okay, so just laying out expectations up front and then letting somebody qualify whether they're a fit or not.
Yeah, I think letting somebody else qualify if they can do the job, and for me then is how well they do in the very specific environment, which is also not universal, right? If I hire somebody with P&L responsibility that might have several hundred employees or so, I'm looking for a very different skill set and personality than if I'm hiring and depending on the size of the organization, I get involved, in impactful positions, not necessarily even by hierarchy, but I pick the positions that I find might be most impactful to the organization, and that's when I insert myself into the hiring process, and that's when I apply some of those filters to figure out if I believe the person is going to do well.
Great. Okay. And is that process, has that been informed by a mistake that you've made in the past? Like, can you think of a mistake that you've made when hiring that you then learned from?
Sure. Yeah, I think anybody who's been around long enough probably did a not so great decision, which is always unfortunate because it's unfortunate for the company. It's unfortunate for the employee. I think the biggest takeaway from the not so great hires was putting too much emphasis on maybe external sources, on references and so forth, and not listening enough to my gut and if I truly believe that it's going to translate.
Okay. So just kind of, I guess the lesson that you learned was just to go with your feeling and I guess your qualification on candidates.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then in terms of your approach to sort of bringing in external talent versus managing internal talent, how do you balance those two things and sort of what do you emphasize in those two areas?
Yeah, my first go-to strategy is always when I join a new organization, I try to identify who has more room to grow and who's interested and capable to grow into larger roles. It's relatively easy to spot folks that might have been not underutilized in terms of workload, but that just have additional capabilities and interests and so forth. Identifying who internally is capable and interested and willing also to go the extra mile, right? Because it's getting out of your comfort zone if you want to move up the ladder. But that's always my go-to, right? Because I love the notion of promoting from within and being able to show to the rest of the organization that hard work and being engaged does pay off, and it's recognized, and it helps you lead to better opportunities, right? At the same time, I don't believe that you should just automatically and exclusively fill every role from within, right? There's something to be noted about identifying critical gaps of the organization, and especially in fast-paced and growth organizations, there's always the need to augment, right, with external talent. So I try to max out what we can achieve by identifying and promoting and developing talent, but depending on the maturity and size of the organization, there's always a number of positions that need to be externally filled, which also is a great opportunity to bring a different perspective to the business, right? It's great to have folks that know the organization really well and have that tribal knowledge and the history and the background. At the same time, if you augment this with industry-leading talent that has been around for quite some time across different organizations, and they've seen best practices that they now can translate and deploy at the new setting, right? I think that's if it's well integrated, provides a lot of value.
Great. And as somebody with your level of experience that's worked across multiple CDMOs, ultimately seen the other side in terms of the innovator side of the industry, the talent landscape and generally the industry must have changed a lot throughout that period. So are there any trends that you've noticed? Is there anything specific within the talent landscape that you think has sort of come to the fore in the last few years?
I think the big differentiator, I would say, is pre and post COVID, right? I wouldn't say that there wasn't a fight for talent before, right? Depending on the pocket that you're operating in, either regionally or in terms of the functional area, there's always been a fight for getting the best folks on board, right? That certainly escalated, as we all know, through COVID and the increase in demand and so forth. I also think that with how much capital is being deployed right now, there's going to be a continued fight for, and I'm not even just talking about like the superstar, exceptional talents or the most amazing leaders that can transform companies. I think there's even just a scarcity of qualified operators, of SMEs, of people who can do the job on the shop floor. Look at how much capital is being deployed by Lilly in Texas, what happens in North Carolina with facility build-outs and billions of dollars being spent. Even with all the technology and AI on the planet, there's going to be people needed to operate, run, and lead those organizations. So I'd say the competition for good people is real, and it's here to stay.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of pre and post COVID. Is there a specific impact that you think COVID has had in terms of, I know you mentioned capital, in terms of the investment and in terms of the impact on the talent landscape?
There's definitely impact it had on how capital is being deployed. There was a time where anybody that had an idea and it had something to do with gene and cell therapy or so, they would raise $150 million seed money, right? The money was just thrown at them if they had an idea that was sexy enough. Those times are over, right? So investment is now a lot more focused. There's a lot more discipline in the diligence and so forth, which also translates into how much rigor is being deployed in identifying and bringing on the right leaders to operate those assets.
So additional pressure on building the right teams, selecting the right leaders, making sure that you have the correct, I guess, processes and structures in place.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And in terms of specifics then, I guess roles that you are finding particularly difficult to fill, is there any area of the business that you found more difficult than others?
One trend I see is that obviously with hybrid work and remote work and so forth, even positions that would benefit from on-site, there's a lot of talent out there and really talent, people that would be qualified and I'm sure would do a good job that are preferring to stay in a remote role, even if the proximity would be close enough, right, to at least do a hybrid role. So I think that's a little interesting to see that people are very selective in the shape and form of their engagement. I obviously before COVID did not see that, right? That's certainly fueled through the possibilities that COVID created, and we take advantage of it. We leverage hybrid work and remote work. However, there's roles that I believe do benefit from the on-site interaction and engagement.
And would you say the increase in remote working or hybrid working has had an impact on building and maintaining culture?
I would say so, yes. I think it provides great opportunities, right, to open up the talent pool, maybe nationwide or at least within the time zone or whatever the priority might be. In some cases, it makes perfect sense for remote roles. Right? For example, business development, our business development directors are regional, so they sit in the respective area and have direct client access, which is wonderful. But at the same time, you want to make sure that they're not satellites that, especially if you're client facing, you want to make sure that they're really tied in with the organization. So things that we do in order to address that and also maintain culture across, the site and the remote positions is heavy on-site presence, not just in the onboarding phase, right? Because obviously you want to get them close to the process, understand how we deliver on our client commitments, but at the same time, also making sure that they're part of the culture and not just included in company-wide emails and so forth, but also participating in like events, for example. If we do a company barbecue, we bring in everybody, and that creates just another layer of collaboration, not just the daily transactional calls, but sharing some memories from the last holiday party or the company barbecue. And I think that enables a lot of the collaboration on a day-to-day basis because we're bringing the team together as often as we can.
So in terms of succession, if you were to leave tomorrow, what does your successor look like and what would their characteristics be?
I'd say that very much depends on if it is tomorrow or if it's in a year from now, right? I think succession planning is important. You always want to make sure that you're building a sustainable, stable organization that can, survive, not just survive, but also strive past your engagement. What's critically important to identify who that could be or what that profile would look like is identifying what's most impactful in your current role and what's going to be required to take the company to the next level. Right? I don't think of succession planning just as to who could do the job, right? Who could keep the lights on or who would be able to do the things that are on the CV, right? But when I think of succession planning, both for myself and also for some of the leaders in my organization, I look for folks that can already operate at that next level and really provide maybe not just the same in terms of continuity, but also a different angle that can help the organization, whatever part of the organization it is, to go to the next level.
Okay. And when you say different angles, so we've kind of touched upon the fact that you have an extensive operational background and that's helped you in terms of building and leading a successful business as CEO. Do you think a different angle in terms of a commercial background or finance background?
Correct. I believe so. Very recent example in the leadership team that I've built here at Pyramid Pharma Services. I look for folks that have experience not just up the career ladder in a very specific field and they know everything in this one swim lane. I look at how well-rounded are they in their profile. Our COO is Doris Micor. She runs the operations, which is manufacturing, supply chain, engineering, IT, and so forth. She's actually a QP and a quality person in her first part of the career, right? So my operations are run by somebody with a quality background. My VP of quality and regulatory, Fred Zales, he actually has 19 years of shop floor experience at Baxter, right? And then many years in quality, regulatory, and analytical roles. So I always look at building teams that stand on a very, very wide basis and that can deploy knowledge from those different areas when they make critical decisions for their specific area of responsibility.
Great, perfect. And in terms of your position and obviously the fact that you continue to lead and grow this business, what motivates you?
The opportunity to create a platform that provides value to many stakeholders. And what I mean with that is I really enjoy building a company that attracts great talent, and where great talent, not just as individual contributors, but where teams come together, where teams achieve great things together, and seeing how they strive. They work very hard, right? Everybody in this organization works extremely hard. It's not an easy job. It's a lot of work. It's tough work, but it's great to see how people give their best and then succeed, and how teams continue to collaborate even more closely. And by the way, we do this and deliver exceptional value to our clients, which is just a great pleasure to be able to build something that provides so many different perspective of value creation to employees and how they build their careers, and to clients on how they benefit from the services that we're providing.
Great. And would you say that's changed at all? Would you say that motivation has sort of stayed the same throughout your career, or have things changed in time as you've taken on more responsibility?
Correct. Yeah, I think over time, the one aspect is I probably didn't look at it as holistically as I do now, right? And if you're starting your career and you're running a certain operation, or you have one functional area that you're responsible for, I might not have looked as much left and right. And over time, that's something that I started enjoying over the years, is better understanding the end-to-end, right? Even if you're not in charge, you don't have to be the CEO in order to think end-to-end along the value chain of where are you engaged in this process and how is value being generated, even though it might be outside of your specific swim lane. Understanding that can just really help navigating a lot of your career.
Great. And one thing that we like to do as well is, as a leader within the industry and as somebody that understands what good looks like when it comes to leadership in CDMO, who would you recommend that we talk to next on this podcast?
Good question. Since I don't know who you already talked with, I would say, have you talked with John Cheminsky?
No, we haven't actually.
John Cheminsky is the ex-CEO of Catalent that brought the organization up, and has a lot of very relevant experience in that space. So
okay,
I think he would be a great next guest.
Great. We'll get in touch with John. I know he's co-hosting the awards this year, isn't he?
That's right.
So, yeah. Okay. We'll get in touch with John. Thank you. So to close, we always do a rapid fire 3 questions to finish, and the first of those is advice. So what's the best advice you've ever received?
There was one moment I remember very vividly. I walked into my boss's office and I knew what I wanted to get out of this conversation, and I thought I was really good prepared because I knew what I wanted. So I walked in and he had like 3 tough questions, and on the third one he goes like, "Did you expect that one?" I said, "No." And his advice at that time was, when you walk up to this door, just pause for a second and think of the 3 questions that I will ask in whatever you're going after. And I literally did, like, before walking up to his office, before I grabbed the door handle, I'm like, what is he going to ask, and how am I going to respond to this? And not just like the obvious, but kind of the 5 whys, or kind of go a little deeper as to and how to prepare for a conversation.
Okay. And is that advice that you would give to the industry and to your leadership team?
Yes, absolutely. Anticipate, don't be too much focused on what you're trying to get out. Think of the different perspectives and be prepared.
Great. Okay. And then one trait that you think everyone in the industry or every leader in the industry should have in 2026?
Compassion.
Okay. Nice. Is that compassion for their team, compassion for clients? I guess, could you define that?
Really all around, I think, for their teams mainly, because if you take care of your team and you know how to build and run a good team, as long as you're not off on the wrong strategy, it will translate into clients. It will translate into client satisfaction and success.
Great. Okay. And final question, in terms of a recent book or podcast or even a person that you found sort of inspirational or has changed your way of thinking recently, is there anything specific that you could point to?
I typically go back to some of the books that I already read maybe 5 or 10 years ago and refresh them. One recent one was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it really resonates because the easy things nobody talks about, right? I was part of a panel discussion last night, and one question was, when are you certain enough to make a big investment in these uncertain times? And I said, when you're comfortable enough to make the decision, it's probably too late. So there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty, and being able to navigate through tough decisions is one of the bigger attributes the more the role grows. So I think that's a good book.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Really good place to finish, I think, and something that I expect would really resonate across the CDMO industry. And when we're talking with leaders, that's exactly what I imagine they'll be interested in. So thanks very much for coming on, Dirk. Really appreciate your time.
Thank
I hope
you.
you have a successful DCAT week, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dirk.